In the corner kennel of Last Chance Animal Shelter sat Max, a 5-year-old retriever mix with soulful eyes that had seen too much. While other dogs barked excitedly when visitors passed, Max merely watched, his gaze drifting toward the empty run where his sister once stayed. Day after day, families came and left with new companions, yet Max remained, the last dog in a shelter meant for dozens. The staff couldn't understand it. His medical charts showed full recovery, his temperament tests revealed nothing but gentleness. Yet whenever adoption papers appeared, Max would retreat to the far corner of his kennel, as if waiting for someone else. Could a dog's heart hold memories so powerful they override his chance at a new beginning? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Matthews pulled her weathered station wagon into the gravel driveway of Last Chance Animal Shelter, the converted farmhouse silhouetted against the pale morning sky. At 58, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, she had traded her veterinary practice for this labor of love 5 years ago. The shelter operated on donations, volunteer hours, and Sarah's unwavering conviction that every animal deserved a second chance. The spring air carried a chill as she unlocked the front door, flipping on lights and starting the coffee maker, rituals that preceded the daily cacophony of barks and meows. But today, the shelter was unnervingly quiet. "Good morning, Max," she called, walking past the row of empty kennels to the last occupied one. The retriever mix lifted his head from his paws, eyes following her without enthusiasm. His faded blue collar, with its tarnished tag reading Max and Lily, caught the fluorescent light. Sarah checked the logbook on her desk, running her finger down the list of successful adoptions from yesterday's event. 12 dogs had found homes, a record for their small operation. Only Max remained. "Just you and me now, buddy," she said, opening his kennel door. The dog rose politely, but made no move to greet her. Instead, his gaze drifted to the empty run 3 spaces down, where his sister Lily had stayed until her adoption 3 months ago. Sarah remembered the day the animal control officer had brought them in, both malnourished, with patches of missing fur and fear in their eyes. The officer had found them abandoned in a foreclosed property, surviving on rainwater and whatever they could scavenge. They'd been inseparable then, huddled together for comfort during their recovery. When the Henderson family had adopted Lily, Max had watched his sister leave with what Sarah could only describe as dignified resignation. She'd expected him to grow depressed, but instead he developed this peculiar waiting behavior, polite but distant with visitors and unwilling to consider leaving with any of them. The buzzing of her phone interrupted her thoughts. The county inspector's name flashed on her screen. "Sarah, Jim Delaney here. Just wanted to confirm our appointment for the 15th. Need to do the annual inspection for your funding renewal." "Yes, Jim. We'll be ready," she replied, eyeing the empty kennels with concern. "Great. I see your adoption event was a success. Congratulations." Sarah hesitated. "Almost a complete success. Still got one left? Well, that'll give us something to look at during inspection. Just remember, the county likes to see full capacity and high turnover. Demonstrates community need." After ending the call, Sarah sat on the floor beside Max's kennel, the concrete cold through her jeans. "What's going on with you, buddy?" she asked softly. "You're healthy, you're handsome, you're gentle as a lamb. Why won't you let someone take you home?" Max responded by placing his head on his paws, eyes fixed on the empty kennel that once housed his sister. The logbook lay open on her lap, the entry from 6 months ago still clear. January 15th, new arrivals, 2 retriever mixes, approx. 5 years old, male and female, possible siblings. Found abandoned at 1472 Oakwood Lane. Condition, malnourished, minor skin infections, no microchips. Names assigned, Max and Lily. Sarah ran her fingers over the entry, then flipped forward to Lily's adoption page from 3 months ago. The Hendersons. had seemed like a perfect match, a middle-aged couple with a fenced yard and plenty of love to give. They'd chosen Lily specifically, drawn to her gentle demeanor. If only someone would see the same qualities in Max. 2 weeks, Sarah murmured, closing the logbook. We've got 2 weeks to find you a home before the inspector comes. She gazed at the retriever, who continued his silent vigil toward the empty kennel. Or at least figure out what you're waiting for. Carlos Mendoza arrived at the shelter promptly at 9, as he had every Tuesday and Thursday since retiring from his carpentry business 3 years ago. At 65, with hands gnarled from decades of craftsmanship and a back that complained. In damp weather, he found peace in the simple routines of animal care. "Morning, Sarah," he called, hanging his worn denim jacket on the hook by the door. "How's our last resident doing today?" Sarah emerged from the supply room with a bag of dog food. "Same as yesterday. Eats a little, walks politely when taken out. But no real engagement." Carlos nodded knowingly. He'd observed Max's behavior for months, noting subtle changes since Lily's departure. "I'll take him for his morning walk," Max greeted Carlos with a perfunctory tail wag, a courtesy rather than enthusiasm. The old carpenter clipped a leash to Max's collar and led him to the fenced exercise yard behind the shelter. Once outside, Max performed his necessary business, then systematically patrolled the perimeter, nose to the ground. "Looking for something, amigo?" Carlos asked softly. After the walk, Carlos settled on the floor outside Max's kennel, his arthritic knees protesting. From his pocket, he produced a worn, stuffed duck, Max and Lily's favorite toy. The retriever's ears perked up at the sight. "Thought, this might cheer you up," Carlos said, offering the toy through the bars. Max took it gently, carrying it to his bed where he placed it with surprising care. Throughout the day, volunteers came and went. Max accepted their attention with distant politeness, never rude, but never connecting. When a young family arrived specifically to meet him, having seen his photo on the shelter's website, Sarah and Carlos watched hopefully as the children tried to engage him with treats and gentle words. "He's very well behaved," the father commented, "but he doesn't seem interested in us at all." "He's still adjusting to being alone," Sarah explained, not wanting to admit she didn't understand. Max's behavior herself. After the family left without filling out adoption papers, Carlos stayed late, curious about something he'd noticed in recent weeks. As evening approached, Max became more alert, watching the clock on the wall with uncanny awareness. At precisely 6:30, he picked up his stuffed duck and sat expectantly. By his kennel door. "Want to go out again, boy?" Carlos asked, opening the door. With unexpected purpose, Max trotted directly to the yard's eastern fence line. There, he placed the duck at his feet and sat tall, eyes fixed on the distant road. Beyond the property, for nearly 20 minutes, he remained perfectly still, scanning the horizon as daylight faded. Carlos observed from a respectful distance, struck by the ritual's precision. This wasn't random behavior. This was purpose. This was waiting. When darkness settled completely, Max picked up his duck and returned to Carlos with the same dignified resignation he showed all day. Back in his kennel, the dog carried the toy to the corner where Lily's run connected to his, the spot where they had often slept, pressed against the dividing bars, as close as they could get to each other. Max turned 3 circles, then settled. With the duck tucked beneath his chin, his gaze still oriented toward the eastern fence and the road beyond. "I think I know what's happening here," Carlos said quietly when he rejoined Sarah in the office. "He's not depressed or unfriendly. He's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Sarah asked, closing her laptop. Carlos looked through the window toward Max's dimly lit kennel. "For Lily. Every evening at the same time, he goes to that fence and watches the road. I think he believes she's coming back." Sarah's expression softened with understanding and heartache. "Oh, Max," she whispered. "She's not coming back, buddy." "To us, it's been 3 months," Carlos said. "But to a loyal dog, time works differently. For Max, Lily just stepped out and he's holding space until she returns." "I want to see it for myself," Dr. Marissa Rivera said, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the shelter's security footage on Sarah's computer. At 62, the veterinary behaviorist had decades of experience, yet still approached each case with fresh curiosity. Sarah had called her in after Carlos shared his theory about Max. The footage showed several nights of Max's ritual, the retriever sitting at the eastern fence line at dusk, sometimes rising to pace, occasionally making soft, mournful sounds toward the road. "Fascinating," Dr. Rivera murmured. "This isn't random behavior. There's clear intentionality." Carlos leaned against the doorframe. "I've never seen anything like it. He's so precise about the timing. Dogs have impressive internal clocks," Dr. Rivera explained, "but this goes beyond that. This has emotional content." She paused the footage on a frame where Max stood alert, ears forward. "I believe Carlos is right. Max is waiting for his sister." "But it's been 3 months," Sarah said. "Wouldn't he have adjusted by now?" Dr. Rivera shook her head. "Not necessarily. Remember, these two survived abandonment together. Their bond likely goes beyond ordinary sibling attachment. It's a survival bond. For Max, Lily might represent safety and stability in a world that's proven untrustworthy." The shelter door chimed, interrupting their conversation. A young woman with bright purple hair and multiple ear piercings bounced in, laptop under her arm. "Sorry I'm late," she announced. "Traffic was insane." "Oh, is that the security footage of Max's evening ritual?" She peered over Dr. Rivera's shoulder. With interest. "Dr. Rivera, this is Emma Chen," Sarah introduced. "Our social media volunteer and resident tech genius." Emma beamed at the title. "I've been brainstorming ways to help Max find his forever home. I'm thinking we need to showcase his special qualities rather than trying to hide his quirks." She opened her laptop, displaying a draft profile for Max on the shelter's adoption website. "I've emphasized his loyalty and gentle nature. Instead of saying he's reluctant to engage, I've framed it as selective with his affection, forming deep bonds." Which is true, right? Sarah nodded, impressed by the young woman's perspective. "I've already had interest," Emma continued. "A retired couple saw his profile this morning and wants to meet him tomorrow." The next afternoon, Walter and Margaret Simmons, both in their 70s, sat patiently on the floor outside Max's kennel. Walter extended his hand through the bars, offering a treat. "We lost our retriever last month," Margaret explained softly. 15 years together. The house feels so empty now." Max approached cautiously, accepting the treat with gentle lips. His behavior was the same as with all visitors, polite but distant. "He's a handsome fellow," Walter commented. "Seems well-mannered." Sarah and Carlos exchanged hopeful glances. Perhaps these experienced dog owners would connect with Max where others had failed. As they continued talking, Margaret mentioned offhandedly, "Our Lily was a retriever too, not as dark as this fellow, but the same gentle eyes." Max's head snapped up at the name, ears fully erect. He rushed to the kennel door, pressing his nose against the bars and whining, the first genuine excitement he'd shown toward any visitor. "Well, look at that," Walter said, surprised. "He seems to recognize the name." Max circled excitedly, then stopped abruptly, his gaze moving between Margaret and the empty kennel where his sister had stayed. The light dimmed in his eyes as he retreated to his bed, settling down with his duck toy tucked under his chin. "That's odd," Margaret said. "Did we do something wrong?" After the couple left, promising to think about the adoption overnight, Carlos, Sarah, and Emma gathered in the office. "Did you see that?" Emma exclaimed. "He reacted to the name Lily." "He thought they were talking about his sister," Carlos said softly, "and when he realized they weren't—" Sarah stared through the window at Max, who had resumed his stoic waiting. "I think we finally know what's going on. He's not just waiting passively, he's actively looking for her." "This is going to break the internet," Emma declared, typing furiously on her laptop. The previous day's encounter with the Simmons couple had given her an idea for a new social media post about Max. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she drafted the story. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Sarah asked, peering over Emma's shoulder at the draft. "We don't want to create false expectations." Emma's post detailed Max's reaction to hearing his sister's name, explaining his daily ritual of waiting by the fence, watching for someone who wasn't coming back. She titled it, "The Last Dog Who Waits, a Story of Unbreakable Loyalty." "People connect with stories like this," Emma insisted. "This isn't just a sad story. It's about loyalty and love, qualities everyone wants in a companion." Carlos, who had been quietly observing, nodded. "She's right. Max's loyalty isn't a flaw, it's his greatest strength." With reluctant permission from Sarah, Emma published the post, complete with a photo of Max sitting by the fence with his stuffed duck, gazing toward the road with soulful eyes. While they waited to see what response the post might generate, Sarah pulled out the shelter's adoption records, searching for information about Lily's new family. "Here it is," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "The Hendersons adopted Lily on February 12th. David and Karen Henderson, mid-50s, no children at home. They had good references, a fenced yard. Everything checked out." Carlos studied the paperwork. "Did they know Lily had a brother?" Sarah frowned, trying to recall the details of that day. "I'm sure I mentioned it, but Lily had already started coming out of her shell more than Max. She was the more adoptable of the two at that point." She flipped through the file until she found the contact information. They left a phone number and email. "Maybe we should reach out, explain the situation." Carlos looked uncertain. "And say what? Your dog's brother is pining for her. Could you bring her back?" "No, of course not. But maybe, I don't know, arrange a visit? Give Max some closure," Sarah suggested, though her voice revealed her doubts. Before they could debate further, Emma burst into the office, her phone in hand. "You guys need to see this. The post has gone mini-viral in our community. Look at the comments." The screen showed dozens of reactions, shares, and comments, far more engagement than their typical adoption posts received. "This broke my heart." Sarah read aloud, "Someone please adopt this good boy. I'm crying at my desk right now." "And look," Emma scrolled down excitedly, 3 serious adoption inquiries already. People are moved by his loyalty." Sarah handed the phone back to Emma, her expression troubled. "But that's just it. If Max is waiting for Lily, will he ever truly bond with a new family? Are we setting everyone up for disappointment?" She picked up the phone and dialed the Hendersons' number, her resolve strengthening. After several rings, it went to voicemail. "Hello, this is Sarah Matthews from Last Chance Animal Shelter. I'm calling regarding Lily, the retriever mix you adopted in February. There's something important I'd like to discuss about her brother Max. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." After hanging up, Sarah turned to find both Carlos and Emma watching her expectantly. "The number's still in service, at least," she said. "Now we wait." 3 days passed with no return call. Emma's post continued to gain traction, bringing more visitors to meet Max, all of whom left touched by his story but discouraged by his distant demeanor. "I tried emailing them too," Sarah told Carlos as they closed the shelter one evening. No response. Carlos, who had been watching Max perform his evening ritual at the fence, joined her in the office. "Something feels off. Let me make a few calls. Tomorrow. I have a buddy who retired from the post office. He might know if they've moved or something." The next morning, Carlos arrived at the shelter with grim news. "The Hendersons moved away about a month ago. Mail forwarding to Colorado. My friend couldn't give me the exact address, but they're definitely not local anymore." Sarah sank into her chair, the implications settling heavily. So Max has been waiting all this time for someone who's hundreds of miles away. Emma's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. What had begun as a mini-viral post within their community had somehow broken through to wider audiences. By the following morning, Max's story had been shared thousands of times, reaching far beyond their small town. "This is insane," she said, scrolling through notifications as she entered the shelter. "We've got people from across the state asking about Max. A woman in Seattle is crying about him. There's even a guy in Australia who wants updates." Sarah looked up from the paperwork on her desk, her expression a mix of amazement and concern. All this attention for one quiet dog who misses his sister. People connect with loyalty, Carlos said, echoing Emma's earlier sentiment. Especially these days, the shelter's phone began ringing non-stop. Local news stations wanted interviews. Donations poured in through their website. The sudden attention was overwhelming, especially for a small operation run primarily by volunteers. "We need to manage this carefully," Sarah cautioned, declining the third interview request that morning. "Max isn't a circus attraction. He's a dog with real emotions who's going through something difficult." As if sensing he was the topic of conversation, Max watched them through his kennel bars, his stuffed duck toy tucked protectively between his paws. By afternoon, visitors began arriving, some genuinely interested in adoption, others simply curious to see the famous waiting dog from the viral post. Sarah and Carlos tried to screen them as best they could, but the volume was unprecedented. "I'll take him," announced a well-dressed woman who arrived in a luxury SUV. "I have a vacation home in Aspen. I could fly him out to Colorado regularly to visit his sister." "That's very generous," Sarah replied carefully, "but Max needs stability and consistency. A constant back and forth might be more stressful than helpful." The woman seemed disappointed, but nodded understandingly before leaving a substantial donation. As closing time approached, Sarah, Carlos, and Emma gathered in the office, exhausted from the day's events. "So what do we do now?" Emma asked, setting aside her phone for the first time all day. "The attention is amazing for donations, but are we any closer to helping Max?" Carlos stroked his chin thoughtfully. "We know the Hendersons moved to Colorado, but we don't have their exact address. Could we find them somehow?" "That feels invasive," Sarah said. "They adopted Lily fair and square. They have no obligation to help with Max's situation." "But they might want to," Emma countered, "if they knew the whole story." A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. A middle-aged man in a rumpled suit stood in the doorway. "Sorry to bother you after hours. I'm Robert Dawson. I used to be a private investigator before I retired. I read about Max online." He paused, seeming almost embarrassed. "My wife and I lost our retriever last year. Reading Max's story, well, it touched me. I'd like to help find the Hendersons." Sarah exchanged glances with Carlos and Emma. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering," Robert insisted. "No charge. Just give me whatever information you have and I'll see what I can do." After Robert left with copies of the Hendersons' adoption paperwork, Sarah locked up the shelter for the night. She paused at Max's kennel, where the retriever had just returned from his evening vigil at the fence. "What are we doing, Max?" she whispered. "Is this right? Should we be trying to reunite you or helping you move on?" Max settled onto his bed, resting his head on his paws, eyes fixed on the empty kennel where Lily had once stayed. The next morning, a local newspaper ran a front-page story, "Last Dog Standing, Community Rallies Behind Loyal Shelter Dog." The article detailed the shelter's financial struggles and the looming county inspection, framing Max's story within the larger context of animal welfare. "This could save the shelter," Emma said excitedly, waving the newspaper. "Look at the donation. Information they included. People want to help." Sarah smiled faintly, her thoughts elsewhere. "That's wonderful. But what about Max? Will all this attention and money actually help him find peace?" Carlos, who had been checking his phone, looked up with a spark of hope in his eyes. "Maybe. Robert just texted. He thinks he's found something." The community meeting at the town library was supposed to accommodate 20 people. Over 50 showed up. "We'll need more chairs," the librarian whispered to Sarah as they surveyed the crowded room. The response to the newspaper article had been immediate and overwhelming. What began as a simple gathering to coordinate volunteer efforts had transformed into something much larger, a community mobilizing around a shared cause. Sarah stood at the front of the room, nervously clearing her throat. Public speaking had never been her strong suit. "Thank you all for coming," she began. I'm honestly overwhelmed by the support. We're here for Max, someone called from the back, triggering murmurs of agreement. Sarah smiled. Yes, for Max, and for what he represents. Loyalty, hope, and the connections that sustain us. She explained their situation. Max's unwavering wait for his sister, the discovery that Lily's family had moved to Colorado, and their efforts to locate them. What we need now is a coordinated approach, she concluded. If we're really going to help Max, we need more than just good intentions. Hands shot up throughout the room. A retired teacher offered to coordinate a search committee. A local printer promised free flyers. 3 truck drivers who ran regular routes to Colorado volunteered to distribute information along their way. In the corner, Robert Dawson, the former private investigator, spread a map across a table. Red circles marked potential locations in Colorado where the Hendersons might have relocated. Based on their employment history and family connections, I've narrowed it down to these 3 towns, he explained to the group gathered around him. Parker, Evergreen, and Littleton, all within the Denver metro area. Carlos studied the map intently. That's still a lot of ground to cover. A woman in her 60s stepped forward. My sister lives in Denver. I can ask her to help distribute information locally. I have vacation time coming up, another volunteer added. I could drive out there. As the meeting continued, Emma worked her social media magic, creating a digital version of the search map that could be shared online. She set up dedicated channels for volunteers to coordinate their efforts and report findings. Dr. Rivera arrived late, slipping in quietly at the back of the room. After the formal meeting concluded and smaller groups formed to discuss specific tasks, she approached Sarah. I heard about all this on the radio, she said. I'm impressed by the response, but I have some professional concerns. Sarah nodded, leading her to a quiet corner. I've been worrying about the same things. Are we being realistic? Even if we find Lily, then what? Exactly, Dr. Rivera said. Dogs form strong bonds, but they also adapt. Forcibly reuniting them after months apart might not yield the storybook ending everyone's hoping for. What would you recommend? The behaviorist considered carefully. If, and it's a big if, you locate the Hendersons, I'd suggest a controlled, neutral territory meeting. Both dogs should be closely monitored for stress signals, and everyone involved needs to be prepared that this might provide closure for Max rather than a happily ever after. Across the room, Carlos was deep in conversation with Robert, their heads bent over the map. The carpenter's weathered hands traced routes between towns, his expression serious. Emma bounced between groups, tablet in hand, connecting digital volunteers with those present in person. Her youth and energy contrasted with the mostly older crowd, yet she commanded respect with her technical expertise. As the meeting wound down, a man in a county uniform entered, scanning the room until he spotted Sarah. Ms. Matthews, Jim Delaney, County Inspector. I came by the shelter for our appointment, but you weren't there. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. The inspection. I completely forgot with all this. Jim waved away her concern. I rescheduled us for next week. I've been hearing about your dog on the news. Quite a story. His expression softened. My wife cried when she watched the segment this morning. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Thank you, Jim. Don't thank me yet. He warned good-naturedly. I'll still need to see a financially viable operation next week. But he added with a wink, something tells me community support won't be a problem anymore. Robert Dawson's meticulous investigative skills paid off faster than anyone expected. 1 week after the community meeting, he arrived at the shelter, clutching a folder of documents, his eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. I found them, he announced without preamble. The Hendersons moved to a small town called Pine Creek just outside of Denver. Sarah, who had been refilling water, Bowles nearly dropped the pitcher. You're certain? Robert opened his folder, spreading the contents across the reception desk. David Henderson took a job with a tech company in Denver. They bought a house in Pine Creek about 2 months ago. Here's the property record. He pointed to a printed document with the Hendersons' names clearly visible. "How did you find all this so quickly?" Carlos asked, impressed. "Social media helps," Robert admitted. Karen Henderson joined a New to Colorado Facebook group. She mentioned moving from our area. That gave me the lead I needed. Sarah studied the documents, emotions warring within her. "So now we know where they are. The question is, what do we do with this information?" Emma, who had been listening from the doorway, joined them at the desk. "We contact them, obviously. Tell them about Max." "It's not that simple," Sarah cautioned. "They adopted Lily fair and square. We can't make demands or make them feel guilty about taking her." "No one's suggesting that," Carlos said gently. "But they deserve to know the situation. Then they can decide what, if anything, they want to do." Sarah nodded reluctantly. "I'll try calling again. Maybe now that we have their new information, they'll be more likely to respond." While Sarah retreated to her office to make the call, Carlos took Max for his afternoon walk. The retriever had developed a slight limp in his right front paw, likely from standing vigil at the fence for so many evenings. "Easy, amigo," Carlos murmured, slowing his pace to accommodate Max's discomfort. They were returning to the building when an unfamiliar car pulled into the parking lot. An older couple emerged, the Harrisons, who had visited earlier that week. "We've been thinking about Max," Mrs. Harrison said as she approached. "We live on 5 acres just outside town, plenty of space for a dog to run." Mr. Harrison nodded. "We're serious about adopting him. We understand his situation, and we're willing to work with his attachment issues." Carlos glanced down at Max, who acknowledged the visitors with his customary polite indifference. "That's very kind," Carlos replied. "Sarah's in her office. Why don't you go speak with her while I get Max settled?" After returning Max to his kennel, Carlos lingered, watching the retriever arrange his stuffed duck toy in its usual position. "You might have a new home soon, amigo," he said softly. "A good one, with kind people." Max looked up briefly before returning his gaze to the empty kennel where Lily had once stayed. Inside the office, Sarah was ending her phone call, her expression troubled. "Still no answer," she reported as the Harrisons settled into chairs across from her desk. "I left another message." She turned her attention to the couple, explaining Max's situation in detail, his bond with Lily, their separation, and his continued waiting behavior. "We understand," Mrs. Harrison assured her. "We had a pair of littermates years ago. When one passed, the other grieved for months." "We're prepared to be patient," Mr. Harrison added. "He may never fully bond with us the way he did with his sister, but we can give him a safe, loving home." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. These people truly understood what they were taking on. As she began to retrieve the adoption paperwork, Emma burst into the office, waving an envelope. "This came in today's mail," she exclaimed. "It must have crossed paths with our calls." The envelope bore a Colorado postmark. Sarah opened it carefully, extracting a Christmas card showing a smiling couple, the Hendersons, standing in front of a snow-dusted pine tree. Beside them sat Lily, her coat gleaming with health, though her eyes held a hint of the same watchfulness that characterized Max's gaze. "They sent this to their old neighbors," Emma explained breathlessly. "The neighbor recognized Lily from our flyers and brought it straight here." Sarah studied the image, her heart constricting at the sight of the dog Max had been waiting for. "All these months, she looks healthy," she observed, "well cared for. But look at her eyes," Carlos said quietly. "She's waiting too." Sarah paced the length of her small office, phone pressed to her ear as she listened to the Hendersons' voicemail message for what felt like the 100th time. The Christmas card showing Lily sat propped against her computer monitor, a constant reminder of what was at stake. "Still nothing?" Carlos asked from the doorway. Sarah shook her head, setting the phone down with a sigh. "I've left 3 messages now, sent emails, nothing." The Harrisons' adoption application lay on her desk, partially completed. They'd been understanding about the delay, agreeing to give Sarah a few more days to try contacting Lily's family before proceeding. "Maybe it's time to accept that they don't want to be found," Carlos suggested gently. "The Harrisons are good people. They understand Max's situation." Sarah ran a hand through her silver-streaked hair. "I know. And logically, that's the sensible path forward. But every time I look at Max doing his evening watch at that fence," she trailed off, her resolve wavering. "What does Dr. Rivera say? That we should prepare for the possibility that even if we do contact the Hendersons, they might not be willing or able to help. Lily is their dog now. They've built a life with her." Carlos nodded thoughtfully. "So the question becomes, what's truly best for Max? A chance to see his sister again, even if just for closure, or learning to build a new bond with a family who already cares about him?" The question hung in the air between them, unanswered. That evening, after the shelter had closed, Sarah found herself sitting beside Max's kennel. The retriever was preparing for his nightly vigil, the stuffed duck clutched gently in his mouth. "I don't know what to do, buddy," she confessed. "I want to help you, but I'm not sure what that looks like anymore." Max regarded her with gentle eyes, his expression seeming to hold more understanding than should be possible for a dog. When Sarah arrived home that night, she made a decision. Opening her laptop, she navigated to a travel site and began searching for flights to Denver. The next morning, she called the Harrisons. "I need to ask a favor," she began. "Would you be willing to wait just a little longer? I'm going to try one." Last thing. After hanging up, she turned to find Carlos, watching her with a knowing expression. "You're going to Colorado?" he stated, rather than asked. Sarah nodded. "I have to try. Even if the Hendersons won't respond to calls or emails. Maybe. They'll talk to me in person. I just need to know if there's any possibility." "When do we leave?" Carlos interrupted. "We? You think I'd let you go alone? Besides," he added with a small smile, "Max trusts me. If there's even a chance of a reunion, he'll need a familiar face." Emma, arriving for her volunteer shift, overheard the last part of their conversation. "You're going to find Lily?" she asked, excitement building in her voice. "Can I help? I can update everyone online, coordinate things here while you're gone." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude for these people who had become more than just shelter volunteers. They'd become a family, united by their concern for one loyal dog. "We need to be practical," she cautioned. "This isn't a guaranteed happy ending. The Hendersons might refuse to see us, or they might agree to a meeting that doesn't go well. Max and Lily have been apart for months now. But we have to try," Carlos insisted. "For Max's sake." Sarah nodded, her resolve strengthening. "We'll drive. It's cheaper and we can bring Max with us. If we do manage to arrange a meeting, he should be there." The next few days passed in a flurry of preparation. Carlos checked Sarah's aging station wagon, replacing the wiper blades and checking the tire pressure. Emma created an online fundraiser to cover their travel expenses, which met its goal within hours. Dr. Rivera provided advice for traveling with Max and what to watch for during a potential reunion, emphasizing the need to proceed slowly and carefully. "Dogs remember each other primarily through scent," she explained. "After this much time apart, they'll need to re-establish their connection gradually." On the morning of their departure, Sarah packed a small suitcase with essentials. Max's supplies took up more space: his food, medications, favorite blanket, and of course the worn stuffed duck that had become a symbol of his unwavering loyalty. "Are we really doing this?" she asked Carlos as they loaded the final items into the car. Nodded, his weathered face determined. "We are, for Max." The miles stretched endlessly before them as Sarah's station wagon hummed along the interstate. They had left at dawn, the shelter temporarily in Emma's capable hands, with the Harrisons helping with daily operations. Now, 6 hours into their journey, the familiar landscapes of home had given way to the vast openness of the plains. Carlos maintained a handwritten travel journal, documenting their progress and Max's behavior. The retriever had surprised them, both by settling calmly in the back seat, more alert and engaged than they had seen him in months. "It's almost like he knows," Carlos observed, watching Max in the rearview mirror. The dog sat upright, nose occasionally pressing against the window, as if searching the passing scenery for something familiar. "Dogs are intuitive," Sarah replied, keeping her eyes on the road. "But I think it's more that he's away from the shelter. Away from that empty kennel that reminds him of what he's lost." They stopped every few hours at rest areas, allowing Max to stretch his legs and relieve himself. At each stop, travelers recognized him from the viral story, approaching with gentle words and requests for photos. "You're a celebrity, amigo," Carlos told the retriever as yet another family waved goodbye, having wished them luck on their mission. By late afternoon, Sarah's phone chimed with a message from Emma. "Donations still coming in. Shelter account has enough to cover repairs now. How's our boy doing?" Sarah smiled, typing a quick reply about Max's surprising alertness. She didn't mention her own growing anxiety about what awaited them in Colorado. What if this journey ended in disappointment? What if the Hendersons refused to meet them? Or worse, what if Lily and Max no longer recognized each other? As if sensing her thoughts, Carlos placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "1 mile at a time, Sarah. That's all we can do." They had planned to drive straight through, but as darkness fell and snow began to dust the windshield, Sarah made the decision to stop for the night. They found a pet-friendly motel just off the highway, a modest place with clean rooms and a small grassy area for dogs. Max explored their room with interest, sniffing each corner before settling on the rug beside Carlos's bed. The stuffed duck toy nestled against his side. "I'll call Robert, see if he has any updates," Sarah said, stepping outside to make the call despite the cold. When she returned, her expression was troubled. "What's wrong?" Carlos asked, looking up from his journal. "Robert's been asking around. Pine Creek, the Hendersons are well liked, apparently, but they're private people. He's not sure they'll welcome our arrival, especially since they haven't responded to any of our messages." "We've come too far to turn back now," Carlos reminded her. "Besides, look at him." Max had risen and moved to the window, paws on the sill. As he gazed out at the snowy night, more animated than they had seen him in the shelter for months. "Something's different about him on this trip," Carlos continued, his voice low. "It's like he's woken up from a long sleep." Sarah nodded slowly. "I've noticed it too. He's more present." The snow continued through the night, accumulating several inches by morning. The forecast showed a winter storm moving across their route, promising challenging driving conditions. "Maybe we should wait it out," Carlos suggested as they ate breakfast from the motel's limited offerings. Sarah watched the snow falling outside. "We can't. The Harrisons are only holding the adoption for another 5 days. We need to reach Pine Creek, find the Hendersons, and get back in time." Carlos studied her face. "This means a lot to you, doesn't it? Not just for Max's sake." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "When my husband died, I had no closure, no chance to say goodbye. It was sudden, a heart attack while I was at work." She gazed at Max, who was watching the falling snow with fascination. "Maybe I see something of myself in him. That waiting, that hope that someone will return, even when your logical mind knows better." Carlos reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Then we drive on, storm or no storm." 3 hours later, they were back on the road, moving slowly through the snowfall. Max seemed energized by the weather, pressing his nose against the cold window, his breath fogging the glass. "Colorado state line coming up," Carlos announced, checking the map. "We're getting closer, amigo." As they crossed the border, Max let out a soft whine, not of distress, but of anticipation, as if he somehow sensed they were drawing nearer to what he had been waiting for all these months. Pine Creek, Colorado, nestled in a valley against the backdrop of snow-dusted mountains, its main street lined with quaint shops and cafes decorated for the approaching holidays. Sarah drove slowly through town, following the GPS directions Robert had sent to the Hendersons' new home. "It's beautiful here, Carlos commented, taking in the scenic surroundings. I can see why they'd want to move. Sarah nodded, though her attention was focused on Max in the back seat. The retriever was fully alert now, head swiveling to take in the new sights and scents, his behavior markedly different from his subdued presence at the shelter. We're about 10 minutes from there. House, she said, checking the map on her phone. Robert said it's in a newer development just north of town. What's our plan when we get there? Carlos asked. We can't just show up at their door with Max in tow. No, you're right. Sarah pulled into a gas station parking lot to regroup. I'll drive past their house first, just to confirm the location. Then we'll find a place to stay, and I'll write them a note explaining everything. A note? Not a visit, Sarah sighed. After all the calls and emails they've ignored, I'm not sure they'd open the door to strangers. A note gives them time to process the situation without feeling ambushed. Carlos nodded his understanding, and they continued on their way. Following Robert's directions, they soon found themselves in a neighborhood of newer homes with spectacular mountain views. The Hendersons' house was a modest two-story with a large fenced backyard, perfect for an active dog like Lily. Slow down, Carlos said suddenly as they approached. Look, in the front window. Sarah eased her foot off the gas, squinting through the windshield. There, framed in the bay window of the Hendersons' living room, sat a retriever with a coat the same. Warm honey color as Max's, her gaze fixed on the street as if watching for someone. Lily, Sarah whispered. In the back seat, Max had gone completely still, his focus locked on the house. A low whine built in his throat, neither pain nor distress, but recognition. He knows, Carlos said softly. Somehow, he knows she's there. Sarah quickly drove past, not wanting to linger suspiciously in front of the house. She circled the block and parked on an adjacent street, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. What now? Carlos asked. We check into a motel, regroup, and draft that letter. We can't rush this, no matter how much Max seems to sense her presence. They found a small motel on the edge of town and secured a pet-friendly room. While Carlos took Max for a walk around the property, Sarah called Robert. For an update. I've been asking around discreetly, the former investigator reported. The Hendersons keep to themselves mostly, but neighbors say they're pleasant. David works remotely 3 days a week. Karen volunteers at the local library on Tuesdays and Thursdays. What about Lily? Have you heard anything about how she's adjusting? That's the interesting part, Robert replied. A woman who lives next door mentioned that their dog sits at the window for hours, especially in the evenings. Sound familiar? Sarah's heart tightened, just like Max. They're both waiting for each other. After ending the call, Sarah sat at the small desk in their motel room, drafting and redrafting a letter to the Hendersons. How did one explain such an extraordinary situation without sounding intrusive or accusatory? Carlos returned with Max, who seemed unusually restless, pacing the small room and repeatedly returning to the door. He knows we're close to her, Carlos observed. Maybe we should reconsider our approach. What if we take him somewhere near their house just to see if he reacts more strongly? Sarah shook her head. Too risky. If the Hendersons saw us, they might feel stalked or harassed. This needs to be handled delicately. She returned to her letter, finally producing a version that felt right. Honest, respectful, and heartfelt. She explained who they were, why they had come so far, and what they hoped might be possible. As evening fell, Carlos ordered takeout from a nearby diner while Sarah addressed an envelope to the Hendersons. I'll deliver this first thing tomorrow morning, she said, sealing the letter. Then we wait. That night, Max slept restlessly, whining in his dreams, his paws twitching as if running. Sarah lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the dog's soft sounds and wondering what tomorrow would bring. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having passed during the night. Sarah rose early, reviewing her letter one final time before folding it carefully into its envelope. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? Carlos asked, watching her prepare to leave. Better if it's just me, Sarah replied. Less intimidating that way. Max sensed her imminent departure, positioning himself between Sarah and the door with an anxious whine. I know, buddy. I'll be back soon, she reassured him, scratching behind his ears. Carlos will take good care of you. The drive to the Hendersons' house took only minutes. Sarah parked a respectful distance away and approached on foot, the envelope clutched in her gloved hand. The neighborhood was quiet, most residents already gone to work or school. No car sat in the Hendersons' driveway, but smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone was home. Sarah hesitated at the edge of the property, second-guessing her decision not to knock directly. What if they simply discarded an unfamiliar letter without reading it? Gathering her courage, she walked up the path to the front door. Through the side window, she caught a glimpse of movement, Lily still maintaining her vigil in the living room. The retriever spotted her and barked once, alert but not aggressive. Sarah quickly slipped the letter into the mailbox and retreated to her car. As she drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror to see a woman, Karen Henderson presumably, opening the front door to investigate the bark. Back at the motel, Carlos and Max were waiting expectantly. Any sign of them? Carlos asked. You're Karen, I think, and Lily, Sarah said, removing her coat. Now we wait. The day stretched endlessly before them. Carlos took Max for extended walks around the motel grounds, while Sarah alternated between checking her phone and calling Emma for updates on the shelter. The Harrisons called again, Emma reported. They're still interested in Max, but they're getting antsy about the timeline. Tell them we appreciate their patience, Sarah said. We should know something definitive in the next day or two. By late afternoon, with no word from the Hendersons, Sarah's anxiety began to mount. Maybe they didn't read it, or maybe they read it and decided to ignore us. Give it time, Carlos counseled. It's a lot for them to process. They ordered dinner from a local pizza place, though neither had much appetite. Max seemed to pick up on their tension, his own restlessness increasing as evening approached. When Carlos took him for his final walk of the night, the retriever strained at his leash, pulling insistently toward the road that led to the Hendersons' neighborhood. He knows exactly where she is, Carlos reported when they returned. He tried to drag me in that direction the entire time. Sarah's phone rang just after 9 o'clock. She didn't recognize the number, but answered immediately, her heart racing. Hello, is this Sarah Matthews? A woman's voice asked. Yes, speaking. This is Karen Henderson. I found your letter today. Sarah sank onto the edge of the bed, gesturing frantically for Carlos to come closer so he could hear. Thank you for calling, Mrs. Henderson. I know our letter must have come as quite a surprise. That's putting it mildly, Karen replied, her tone cautious but not unfriendly. You came all the way from New York with Max? We did. I know it sounds extreme, but after seeing his behavior these past months, we had to try something. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When we adopted Lily, the shelter mentioned she had come in with another dog, but we didn't realize they were so attached. We just fell in love with her gentle nature. She's a wonderful dog, Sarah agreed quickly. And you gave her a loving home when she needed one. We're not here to disrupt that or make you feel guilty. Then what exactly are you hoping for? Karen asked directly. Sarah took a deep breath. Just a meeting, a chance for the dogs to see each other one more time. It might help them both move forward, especially Max. He's been waiting all this time. Another silence stretched between them, longer this time. Lily does the same thing, Karen finally admitted, her voice softer now. Sits by the window for hours. We couldn't figure out what she was watching for. Carlos squeezed Sarah's hand encouragingly. My husband and I need to discuss this, Karen continued. Can I call you back tomorrow? Of course, Sarah said, relief flooding through her. We'll be here. Thank you for considering it. After the call ended, Sarah looked at Carlos with cautious hope. They didn't say no. They didn't say no, he echoed with a smile. That night, for the first time in months, Max slept soundly, the stuffed duck toy tucked securely beneath his chin. The local cafe buzzed with morning conversation, the clinking of cups and sizzle of the grill forming a comfortable backdrop. Sarah had arrived 15 minutes early, securing a quiet table by the window. Carlos had stayed at the motel with Max, both agreeing it would be better for Sarah to meet the Hendersons alone first. Karen Henderson arrived precisely at 10, accompanied by a tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. David, Sarah presumed. She stood to greet them, suddenly nervous. "Sarah, I'm Karen, and this is my husband, David." Handshakes were exchanged, and coffee ordered. An awkward silence settled over the table until David cleared his throat. "I want to be direct," he began. "We were surprised by your letter and, frankly, a bit concerned about you tracking us down." Sarah nodded, understanding their perspective. "I know how it must seem. If I were in your position, I'd feel the same way. But I promise, we're not here to cause trouble or make demands." "Then help us understand," Karen said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "You drove all this way because of a dog's attachment." Sarah took a deep breath and explained everything. Max's daily ritual at the fence, his reaction to hearing Lily's name, the shelter's financial struggles, and the community that had rallied around his story. "We thought he was depressed at first," she concluded, "but Dr. Rivera, our veterinary behaviorist, helped us see that he was waiting, actively waiting for Lily to return." The Hendersons exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Lily had a rough adjustment when we first brought her home," Karen admitted. "She wouldn't eat much, seemed listless. The vet found nothing physically wrong. She started improving after about a month," David continued. "But she developed this habit of sitting by the front window for hours, especially in the evenings." "Around 6:30, Sarah asked quietly. Karen's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, actually. How did you know?" "That's when Max goes to the fence at the shelter. Every day, like clockwork." David ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. "When we adopted Lily, we specifically wanted an older dog. Most people want puppies, but we felt an older dog deserved a second chance. The shelter mentioned she had come in with another dog," Karen added, "but they didn't emphasize any special bond. We thought we were doing a good thing, giving her a home." "You were," Sarah assured them quickly. "You are. Lily looks healthy and well cared for. We saw her through your window yesterday. I hope that doesn't sound too intrusive." "A bit," David said with a wry smile, "but under the circumstances, understandable." Karen reached into her purse and extracted a folder, placing it on the table. "We brought Lily's medical records. We've been working with a vet here to address some ongoing health issues she had when we adopted her." Sarah examined the documents, noting the detailed care the Hendersons had provided. Treatments for lingering skin problems, dental work, specialized food for a sensitive stomach. "You've been wonderful owners," she said sincerely, returning the folder. "That's obvious, which makes this situation all the more difficult," David replied. "We love Lily. She's part of our family now. But hearing about her brother, seeing how they've both been waiting for each other." He trailed off, clearly conflicted. "What exactly are you hoping will happen here?" Karen asked directly. "If we agree to a meeting, then what?" Sarah had asked herself the same question countless times during their journey. "Honestly, I don't know. Best case, it gives them both some closure. Maybe Max will finally be ready to accept a new home with the Harrisons, the couple waiting to adopt him. And worst case?" David pressed. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Worst case, we confirm what we already suspect, that these dogs share a bond we don't fully understand, and separating them permanently might never allow either to fully adapt." The implication hung heavily in the air between them. "We need to think about this," Karen said finally. "This isn't just about the dogs. It's about our family, our lives here." "I understand completely," Sarah assured them. "We'll respect whatever decision you make." As they prepared to leave, Karen hesitated. How long are you staying in Pine Creek? We have the motel room for 3 more days. After that, we need to head back. The Harrisons are only holding their adoption offer until the end of the week. David nodded thoughtfully. We'll call you tomorrow morning. This isn't a decision we can make lightly. Sarah watched them leave, hope and anxiety warring within her. The Hendersons clearly loved Lily and wanted what was best for her, but was that being reunited with her brother or maintaining the stable home they had provided? The call came earlier than expected. Sarah was still sipping her first cup of coffee. The next morning when her phone rang, Karen Henderson's number lighting up the screen. "We've made a decision," Karen said without preamble. "We'd like to arrange a meeting between Max and Lily." Relief flooded through Sarah. "Thank you. I can't tell you how much this means." "David and I talked late into the night," Karen continued. "We love Lily, and we want what's best for her. If seeing her brother will help her and him, then we should at least try." They agreed to meet that afternoon at a local dog park, neutral territory, where both dogs could feel comfortable and safe. Sarah called Dr. Rivera immediately after hanging up, seeking last-minute advice. "Keep the first meeting brief," the behaviorist counseled. "Watch for signs of stress in both dogs. Remember, they may not react the way you expect. It's been months. Their relationship might have changed." Carlos spread a map of the dog park across the motel bed, studying the layout. "There's a quieter area on the east side, away from the main entrance. Less crowded, more controlled." Sarah nodded, marking the spot with a pen. "We should arrive early, get Max settled before they come with Lily." "Should we bring his duck toy?" Carlos asked. "No," Sarah decided after a moment's thought. "Let's not complicate things with objects. Just the dogs, seeing each other without distractions." They prepared methodically, taking Max for a long morning walk to burn off excess energy, then offering him a light meal. The retriever seemed to sense something significant was happening. His usual distant demeanor had shifted to alert anticipation. "He knows," Carlos murmured, watching Max track their movements around the motel room. "Somehow he knows today is different." Robert Dawson called mid-morning with an unexpected offer. "I spoke with the local animal control officer, an old colleague from my PI days. He's willing to be present at the meeting, just in case you need an official presence." Sarah accepted gratefully. Another set of experienced hands couldn't hurt, especially if things didn't go as hoped. By 2 o'clock, they were at the dog park, having arrived 30 minutes before the agreed meeting time. The park was relatively quiet on the weekday afternoon, with only a few other dogs and their owners scattered across the large space. Carlos led Max to the designated area, giving him time to explore the unfamiliar surroundings. The retriever sniffed the perimeter thoroughly, marking several spots, but continually returned to Carlos's side, as if checking that his human companion was still there. "He's nervous," Carlos observed, "but not stressed. That's good." Sarah paced, nearby, alternating between watching the park entrance and checking her phone. Robert arrived with Officer Jensen, a stocky man in his 50s with a calm, professional demeanor. "We'll stay back unless needed," Robert assured her. "Just here for support." At precisely 2:30, a blue SUV pulled into the parking lot. Sarah's heart raced as she watched the Hendersons emerge, leading a retriever on a leash, Lily looking healthy and alert, her honey-colored coat gleaming in the winter sunlight. "They're here," she called softly to Carlos, who nodded and positioned himself strategically with Max, now sitting obediently at his side. Sarah walked to meet the Hendersons at the gate, exchanging brief greetings. "How should we do this?" Karen asked, her grip tight on Lily's leash. The female retriever was extraordinarily focused, her attention fixed on the distance where Max waited. "Slowly," Sarah advised, remembering Dr. Rivera's guidance. "Let's walk them toward each other on leash, giving them space to see and scent each other before getting too close." David nodded agreement. "Lily's friendly with other dogs, but she can be a bit shy at first." They began the careful approach, each human team walking deliberately across the open space. Max, who had been sitting calmly beside Carlos, suddenly stiffened, his nose lifting to test the air. "He's caught her scent," Carlos said quietly, maintaining a firm but gentle hold on the leash. 20 yards. 15. 10. Both dogs now completely focused on each other, ears forward, bodies tense with anticipation. "Let's stop here," Sarah suggested when they were about 8 feet apart. "Give them a moment to recognize each other." Max stood perfectly still, his gaze locked on Lily. The female retriever mirrored his posture, a slight tremor running through her body. For several heartbeats, neither dog moved. Sarah held her breath. Had they waited too long? Were the siblings now strangers to each other after months apart? Then, almost imperceptibly, Max's tail began to move. Not the polite acknowledgement he offered visitors at the shelter, but a genuine, hopeful wag. Time seemed suspended in that winter afternoon at the dog park, all eyes fixed on the two retrievers, regarding each other across the shrinking distance. Lily's tail began to move as well, tentatively at first, then with growing certainty. "Should we move closer?" David asked softly, careful not to break the moment. Sarah nodded, and they reduced the gap to about 5 feet. Both dogs remained focused entirely on each other, their bodies trembling slightly with contained energy. "I think we can let them greet now," Carlos suggested, "but keep the leashes loose, let them choose how to approach." With gentle encouragement, the handlers moved forward until the dogs were within reach of each other. Max stretched his neck, nose extended, while Lily mirrored his movement. Their muzzles touched briefly, that first crucial exchange of scent. For one breathless moment everyone watched, uncertain. Then Lily made a small sound, not quite a whine, not quite a bark, and lunged forward with sudden enthusiasm. Max responded instantly, his entire body wriggling with joy as they circled each other, sniffing frantically, tails whipping the air. "They remember," Karen whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The humans carefully managed the leashes as the dogs performed their reunion dance, circling and sniffing, occasionally pressing their bodies against each other. There was no aggression, no hesitation, only recognition and what could only be described as joy. "I think we can try off-leash in the enclosed area," Officer Jensen suggested, pointing to a nearby section of the park specifically designed for smaller or more controlled interactions. They moved to the suggested space, a fenced area perhaps 30 feet square. After one final check that both dogs were calm and friendly, they unclipped the leashes simultaneously. What followed brought tears to every human eye. Max and Lily erupted into play, racing in circles, play-bowing, nipping gently at each other's ears in a dance they must have performed countless times before their separation. Max, who had moved with such measured restraint at the shelter, now bounded with puppy-like exuberance. Lily matched his energy, leading him in circles, then following his lead in turn. "I've never seen Lily like this," Karen marveled. "She plays with other dogs at the park, but nothing like this." "Max either," Sarah agreed. "At the shelter he's polite but distant, like he's going through the motions." Carlos had secured bright red bandanas for both dogs before their arrival, making them easily identifiable among the park's other visitors. The matching accessories only emphasized their connection as they romped together. "It's like they're speaking their own language," David observed, as the dogs engaged in a complex game of chase that seemed to follow rules only they understood. After about 15 minutes of vigorous play, both retrievers flopped down side by side, panting happily. Max rested his head on Lily's back in a gesture so natural and familiar it could only have been born from their shared history. "What do we do now?" Karen asked quietly, the unspoken question hanging in the air between them all. Before anyone could answer, Max rose and approached Carlos, then returned to Lily, as if trying to introduce his human friend to his sister. Lily did the same with Karen, moving between her owner and Max with obvious excitement. "They want us to know each other," Carlos said, his voice thick with emotion. The humans took the hint, sitting together on a nearby bench, while the dogs settled, at their feet, still touching, still intensely aware of each other's presence. "I've never seen anything quite like it," Officer Jensen commented. "In all my years working with animals, this level of recognition and bond after months apart is extraordinary." Robert nodded agreement. "It's as if no time has passed for them." The afternoon light began to fade. The reality of their situation pressed in once more. Soon they would need to separate the siblings again. Max returning to the motel with Sarah and Carlos, Lily going home with the Hendersons. "We should probably start wrapping up," Sarah suggested reluctantly. "It's getting cold and we don't want to overwhelm them on the first meeting." Karen nodded, though her expression revealed her own reluctance. "This went better than I could have imagined. They clearly remember each other." "More than remember," David added quietly. "They still love each other." As they prepared to part ways, clipping leashes back onto now tired dogs, Karen turned to Sarah. "We need to talk more about this situation. Would you and Carlos join us for dinner tomorrow night? At our home?" Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Carlos, who nodded encouragingly. "We'd be honored," she replied. "Thank you." When the time came to lead the dogs in opposite directions, both retrievers resisted, pulling back toward each other with soft whines of protest. The humans gently but firmly guided them apart, promising with soothing words that this wasn't a final goodbye. Max looked back over his shoulder repeatedly as Carlos led him to the car, his earlier joy fading to confused concern. That evening, back at the motel, Emma called with news from home. "You won't believe this," she began excitedly. "Someone uploaded a video of Max and Lily's reunion to social media. It's everywhere." "A video?" Sarah repeated, puzzled. "Who would have—" "Robert," Carlos guessed, shaking his head with a small smile. "I saw him filming with his phone. Must have sent it to Emma." The video had indeed come from Robert, who had captured the siblings' joyful reunion with remarkable clarity. Emma had shared it on the shelter's accounts, where it quickly gained traction, amplified by those who had followed Max's story from the beginning. "The comments are incredible," Emma continued. "People are crying, sharing their own stories about sibling pets. And donations. Sarah, we've received enough to cover the shelter's operating costs for months." While this was undeniably good news for the shelter, Sarah felt a new weight of responsibility. What had begun as a mission to help one loyal dog had evolved into something much larger, with hundreds of strangers now emotionally invested in the outcome. Max lay on the motel room carpet, unusually animated after his reunion with Lily. Rather than his typical withdrawn demeanor, he moved restlessly from window to door, occasionally emitting soft whines. "He doesn't understand why they were separated again," Carlos observed, sitting beside the retriever to offer comfort. "What are we going to do?" Sarah asked quietly, more to herself than Carlos. "The Harrisons are waiting for an answer. We need to head home soon, but after seeing them together today..." The question lingered without resolution as they prepared for their dinner with the Hendersons the following evening. When they arrived at the Hendersons' home, Lily greeted them at the door with unmistakable excitement, clearly recognizing Max's scent on their clothing. Max, for his part, strained at his leash, whining with anticipation as they approached the house. The reunion between the siblings was just as joyful as the previous day, though somewhat calmer in the familiar environment of Lily's home. Once the initial excitement subsided, the dogs settled side by side in the living room while the humans gathered around the dining table. Karen had prepared a homemade lasagna, the rich aroma filling the house with warmth that contrasted with the heavy conversation ahead. "We've been thinking non-stop about yesterday," David began, serving salad onto everyone's plates. "Seeing them together like that, it was remarkable." "And concerning," Karen added. "Lily was different when we brought her home. So subdued. We thought it was just adjustment to a new place, but now I wonder if she was grieving for Max all along." Max was the same, Sarah replied, going through the motions, but never truly engaged. They ate in thoughtful silence for a few minutes, the only sounds coming from the living room where the dogs dozed contentedly together. Emma shared the reunion video with us, Carlos said, breaking the silence. Someone filmed it at the park yesterday. We saw it, Karen nodded. Our neighbor sent it to us, not realizing that was our Lily. It's quite something to see your personal situation through strangers' eyes. David set down his fork. So let's address the elephant in the room. What happens now? You'll be heading back to New York soon. Max has potential adopters waiting. Where does that leave all of us? The directness of the question hung heavily in the air. There are no perfect solutions, Sarah admitted. The Harrisons are wonderful people who would give Max a loving home. But after seeing him with Lily, he might never fully bond with them, Carlos finished, not the way he has with his sister. Karen reached for her tablet, queuing up the video from the park. They watched in silence as the dogs recognized each other, their joy unmistakable even on the small screen. Our lives are here now, David said finally. My job, Karen's volunteer work, the house we just bought, moving back to New York isn't feasible. And the shelter is there, Sarah added. My life's work, plus Max has the Harrisons waiting to adopt him. The impasse seemed insurmountable. 2 households, 2 states apart, with 2 dogs who clearly belonged together but had separate lives established. There has to be another option, Carlos insisted. Something we haven't considered yet. In the living room, Max and Lily had shifted in their sleep, the female retriever's head now resting protectively over her brother's neck, their breathing synchronized in slumber. Karen followed Sarah's gaze to the sleeping dogs. Look at them, she said softly. They've found each other again after months apart. How can we justify separating them a second time? After dinner, they moved to the living room, careful not to disturb the sleeping dogs. Karen served coffee, while David stoked the fire in the hearth, the crackling flames, providing both warmth and a meditative focal point for their difficult conversation. I keep thinking about Max's waiting ritual, Sarah said, cradling her mug. Every day at the same time, watching the road, never giving up hope. Lily does the same thing here, Karen replied. By the window, especially around sunset. David and I used to joke that she was watching for the mail carrier, but she was watching for Max, Carlos said softly. The room fell silent again, save for the gentle snoring of the retrievers and the pop of burning logs in the fireplace. I've been turning over possibilities in my mind, Carlos continued after a moment. What if I relocated here? 3. Surprised faces turned toward him. You'd move to Colorado? Sarah asked, stunned. Carlos nodded slowly. I'm retired. My children are grown with families of their own. I rent my apartment. He shrugged, as if the idea was simpler than it sounded. I could bring Max here, find a place nearby. The dogs could see each other regularly. That's incredibly generous, David said, clearly moved. But it's a massive life change for you. At my age, change keeps you young, Carlos replied with a small smile. Besides, these mountains are beautiful. I could do worse for a retirement view. Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions, admiration for Carlos's selflessness, sadness at the thought of losing both him and Max from her daily life, and lingering doubt about whether this solution would truly work long-term. There might be another option, Karen said hesitantly. She exchanged a glance with David, who nodded encouragingly. We've been talking about this non-stop since yesterday. What if... She paused, gathering courage. What if we sold Max and Lily to one family? Let them be together? But you love Lily, Sarah protested, and she's clearly happy with you, apart from missing her brother. We do love her, David confirmed. But after seeing them together, we've been asking ourselves, what's truly best for her? Maybe it's being with her brother, even if that means with another family. The suggestion hung in the air, noble in its selflessness, but heavy with sacrifice. Wait, Carlos said suddenly. What if there's a third option we haven't considered? All eyes turned to him as he leaned forward intently. Sarah, what's keeping you in New York? Really? She blinked, surprised by the direct question. Well, the shelter, of course. My home, my life. The shelter has Emma now, and the community support has never been stronger, Carlos pointed out. Your house is rented, not owned. And as for your life, he gestured around them, life can be built anywhere. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. You're suggesting I move to Colorado? Not just move here, Carlos continued, warming to his idea. Start fresh. These mountains must need veterinary services, shelter volunteers. The local shelter is actually understaffed, Karen offered. They've been advertising for an experienced manager for months. And there's a small house for rent just 3 doors down from us, David added, his enthusiasm growing. The Mitchell place. They're moving to Arizona next month. 2 bedrooms, fenced yard. Sarah sat back, momentarily overwhelmed by the radical suggestion. Leave New York. The shelter she'd built for a dog. No, she realized. Not just for a dog. For Max and Lily. For their extraordinary bond that had touched thousands of people online. For the chance to honor that loyalty rather than sever it. And perhaps, she acknowledged privately, for herself too. For the possibility of change after years of comfortable routine. For the unexpected friendship with Carlos that had deepened during their journey. This is a lot to consider, she said finally. Of course it is, Carlos agreed. No one's expecting an immediate decision, but it's worth thinking about, isn't it? As if sensing they were being discussed, Max and Lily stirred from their nap. Max rose first, stretching before padding over to Sarah and resting his head on her knee, a gesture of affection he had rarely shown at the shelter. Lily followed, settling beside Karen, but maintaining contact with her brother. Look at them, David said softly. They've figured out how to be together while still connecting with each of us. Maybe we should follow their example. Sarah absently stroked Max's ears, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't considered before this journey began. The thought of leaving behind the life she'd built was terrifying, yet the path forward suddenly seemed to open before her, unexpected but somehow right. I'd need time to arrange everything, she said slowly. The shelter transition, my house, Carlos. And the Hendersons exchanged hopeful glances, recognizing that her response wasn't a rejection, but the beginning of a consideration. And I'd want to see the Mitchell place, she added, a small smile forming. Make sure it's suitable for a loyal retriever with particular habits. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the porch of her small Colorado home, watching the spring. Sunlight filtered through the budding trees. Max lay at her feet, his head resting contentedly on his paws, no longer watching the horizon with anxious anticipation. The transition had been both simpler and more complex than she'd imagined. Emma had stepped up as the shelter's new director, her youthful energy and social media savvy bringing fresh perspectives to the operation. The viral video of Max and Lily's reunion had created enough community goodwill and donations to secure the shelter's future, at least for the foreseeable future. The Harrisons had been disappointed but understanding when Sarah called to explain the situation. Some bonds can't be broken, Mrs. Harrison had said. We'll find another dog to love. Sarah had sold most of her furniture, packed her essential belongings, and made the cross-country drive with Max and Carlos 3 weeks after. Their fateful dinner with the Hendersons, the Mitchell house, just 3 doors down from Lily's home, had proven perfect. A cozy 2-bedroom with a large fenced yard and a mountain view that still took Sarah's breath away each morning. The local animal shelter had hired her as a consultant, initially, which had quickly evolved into a part-time management role that allowed her to share her expertise while maintaining flexibility in her schedule. She had even begun offering limited veterinary services for senior pets, filling a niche in the community. The dogs had settled into a comfortable routine. Max spent his days with Sarah, accompanying her on morning hikes and afternoon errands. 3 days each week, he joined Lily at the Hendersons' home while Sarah worked at the shelter. On weekends, both families often gathered for cookouts or excursions to nearby parks, the dogs inseparable during these shared activities. The sound of approaching footsteps drew Sarah's attention. Carlos walked up the path to her porch, carrying a bag of groceries and wearing the relaxed smile that had become his standard expression since their move. He had found a small apartment in town, close enough for daily visits but maintaining his independence. His carpentry skills had quickly made him popular in the community. His handcrafted furniture now featured in several local shops. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, lifting the grocery bag. "David and Karen will be here with Lily around 6. "Looking forward to it?" Sarah replied, making room for him to pass into the house. Max rose at Carlos's arrival, following him inside with the easy confidence of a dog who knew exactly where he belonged. Sarah remained on the porch a moment longer, reflecting on the unexpected turn her life had taken. At 58, she had uprooted herself, left behind a lifetime of work, and moved across the country, all because one dog refused to give up on his sister. Some might call it foolish, impractical, excessive, but watching through the window as Carlos prepared dinner, with Max now joined by Lily, the Hendersons must have arrived early, Sarah felt only certainty. The sight of the siblings curled together on the rug, their matching tags catching the light, confirmed what she had somehow known since that first day she'd watched Max waiting by the fence. Some bonds transcend our understanding, yet deserve our respect nonetheless. Karen appeared in the doorway, waving Sarah inside. "Come on, Chef Carlos says the appetizers are ready." As Sarah joined her newfound family, human and canine alike, she marveled at how the world could change when you allowed yourself to follow unexpected paths. What had begun as a mission to help one loyal dog had transformed her own life in ways she could never have anticipated. Max and Lily greeted her with synchronized tail wags, no longer waiting for something lost, but fully present in the moment, together. David raised his glass in a toast. "To loyalty," he said simply. "To family," Carlos added. "To new beginnings," Sarah concluded, her heart full. Outside the window, the Colorado sunset painted the mountains in hues of gold and purple. Inside, 2 retrievers with matching tags dozed side by side on the rug, their patient waiting finally. Over, their circles complete. Some might call their journey extraordinary. But Sarah knew better. It was simply the natural conclusion to a story of ordinary loyalty, the kind that waits by fences at dusk, that watches from windows without losing hope, that recognizes what belongs together and refuses to accept anything less, the kind that, when honored rather than dismissed, shows us the way home.